A shocking development made in the search of a missing Texas mom who disappeared 3 weeks ago. We've previously reported on the case of 51-year-old Suzanne Simpson, who was last seen on the morning of October 7th by her neighbor. The last known photo of her before she went missing shows a Texas realtor in a dark-colored dress and heels. The case would take another turn when Suzanne's husband Brad was arrested and charged with assault causing bodily injury, family violence, as well as unlawful restraint. According to police, a neighbor witnessed the couple physically fighting, and Brad allegedly grabbed his wife by her upper torso area to gain control of her body. That same neighbor later heard screaming coming from a nearby wooded area by the Simpsons' home. Then Brad got into his pickup truck and left their home, only to return about an hour or two later. Loved ones began to notice something was off because the following day, the couple's child's school called Brad to tell them their child hadn't been picked up, which is something Suzanne normally did. Then the following day, after police interviewed staffers at the school where one of their children attends, the 5-year-old child reportedly told staff her parents were fighting and that her dad assaulted her mom and took her phone away. The child also said Suzanne had a bruise on her elbow. But then another twist in the case. Brad's business associate was arrested this week accused of tampering with evidence. According to court documents, Brad allegedly texted his business partner, James Valley Cotter, a day after his wife disappeared, asking him to hide an AK-47. Brad allegedly texted Cotter saying, quote, "If you're in Bandera, can you haul to meet me at your house? I don't have much time." Then another text allegedly sent by Brad said, "Sorry for the urgency, but you're all I got, especially now. Social media is destroying me." According to police, Cotter agreed to hide the weapon at his San Antonio home, but not in a gun safe, instead in the wall of his home. ATF searched Cotter's home this week, and the K-9 team helps locate where exactly the AK-47 was, and it was retrieved out of a void in the wall. The gun reportedly was captured on video provided by someone working with the investigation, showing the same gun in a vault in the Simpsons' house. Brad Simpson, in turn, now faces an additional state charge of prohibited weapons and tampering/fabricating evidence after the discovery of the AK-47. The father of 4 also faces a federal gun charge after he was found to be illegally in possession of a short-barreled rifle. Cotter was arrested Monday for allegedly hiding the gun and is also accused of tampering with evidence and not being truthful with law enforcement. But at this time, neither men have officially been charged in connection to the disappearance of Suzanne Simpson. Now, 3 weeks after she vanished without a trace, her family is holding on to hope for more answers. And while the search for Suzanne Simpson continues, let's bring on former FBI and CIA agent Tracy Walder to break down this case even further. Tracy, it's so great to see you. Suzanne Simpson has been missing for 3 weeks now. What's your reaction and where does the search go from here?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Elizabeth. It's really difficult because the husband is being uncooperative. In this case, he's refusing to show up for interviews and those kinds of things. I think right now, the search where it's going to go from here is unfortunately probably starting the use of cadaver dogs at some point, if they haven't already. Although I know the scent may be gone after about 3 weeks, but at least beginning a trail of where things started and where things ended. Also, in terms of a really deep dive of her cell phone, I'm not certain yet, you can correct me if I'm wrong, if they have received a warrant to go through her husband's, but that takes some time as well because he's not a willing participant. You would have to get a warrant from the phone company to be able to do that. And that's going to take some time, but I would imagine that's a focus of something they're doing right now.
And I think a lot of times when we see these types of cases, first investigators look to anyone who's close to the person who's missing, including a boyfriend or in this case, the husband, and making it clear, at this time, Brad Simpson hasn't been charged in her disappearance. But why do you think he's been so uncooperative in the investigation?
That's a really good question, and you're right. Obviously, he's not been named a suspect. You're correct in making that very clear. I think part of why he has not been cooperative is because information has come out through the press and through other means that she was screaming in that evening before she was missing, that he had pushed her up against a wall. Allegations, again, of abuse. We don't, again, have confirmation, but allegations of abuse. And so I think right there makes him a suspect, and he probably knows that. And that is why he is being uncooperative, although it's incredibly frustrating because she is a mother of children, he is a father of children, and I would think you would want to know what happened to their mother.
And then we have this whole added twist now of Brad's business associate associate also being arrested for tampering with evidence, though. What do you make of this added twist as authorities allege James Cotter helped Brad hide an AK 47?
I think that that's interesting. And I think, in my opinion, again, this is just my opinion, they're probably doing that to apply pressure to Mr. Simpson, in that if this individual talks, right, he can then reduce his sentence, reduce the charges against him, whatever plea deal it is that they're thinking of offering him, to get information on her whereabouts. That's what I think. Now, I am not certain of this individual's role in an actual crime itself, but what that tells me is that they are assuming, again, it's all alleged at this point, that perhaps that gun was used in the commission of a crime or was obtained illegally. And if that's the case, then yes, he is a participant in that. Although the charge of that is not obviously nearly as large as murder or concealing a body or anything like that. But I do think that they are using that as, I hate to use this, but as a bargaining chip, quite frankly, to get information from the husband.
And the text messages Brad Simpson sent to Cotter are pretty damning if you interpret them kind of in a nefarious way. Brad Simpson allegedly wrote, "If you're in Bandera, can you haul butt to meet me at your house? I don't have much time." And he sent that a day after Suzanne was reported missing. I mean, what do you make of just those text messages that came out in the affidavit? What do you make of those?
So the text messages that were sent between the two are obviously very incriminating, and in my opinion may go towards adding premeditation to a charge or adding concealment of a body, and so, or tampering with a body. And so I think that is very critical in this case. Obviously those text messages are not, coming out as a confession, but I do see those text messages, if he is ultimately charged, in terms of going towards a first degree murder situation rather than a second degree.
And it was interesting too because Cotter didn't just hide the AK 47 at his house, he hid it in the wall of his home. That's not a typical hiding spot, especially for a large weapon like an AK 47. What do you kind of make of just where the placement of that weapon was within his home?
So obviously that's critical too. It's one thing to say, "Hey, would you mind storing my weapon? I have kids in my home, or I'm doing home remodeling, and I don't want anyone getting it." Someone would either probably put it in a gun safe, or a gun cabinet, right? That seems to be a logical explanation for concealing or taking a weapon that someone has given you. By putting it into a wall, first of all, that takes a lot of effort and work. And I also think too, they're trying to circumvent, in my opinion, a potential search warrant, right? If the police come into his home, and are tearing it up, they are less likely to go into a wall to look for an AK-47. If they're looking for flash drives, things that are really small, they will go into walls to do that. And so this is very purposeful, in my opinion, to hide it in a wall to try to get around a search warrant. I think that's what they're thinking about.
And, just for our viewers, again, we just want to emphasize that they have not been charged at this point in connection to Suzanne Simpson's disappearance. But, Tracy, I want to ask you, do you have any hope for Suzanne Simpson? And what do you think her family is feeling right now as she's still missing and then now Brad is behind bars?
You know, I hate to say this. I'm a mom myself and she has children, so I always try to be careful about that. But as you mentioned earlier, it has been 3 weeks. You have an uncooperative husband. You have accomplice, right? Because that individual has been charged. And so I think at this point, in my opinion, it's not looking as though she will be found alive, which is probably incredibly difficult for her family. I just have a hard time believing that she wouldn't have tried to contact someone at this point.
Hey, Tracy, again, thank you so much for your time. I always appreciate it.
Thank you.
At this time, James Cotter is being held on a $500,000 bond and is reportedly requesting a reduction of his bond, saying the amount is excessive for him and his family. Meanwhile, Brad Simpson is being held on a $3 million bond. His next court date is slated for November 13th. Reporting for Law and Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.